Hola y bienvenidas a Sex in Spanglish, where we empower mujeres to get in touch with their bodies, own their pleasure, and where we discuss all the cochinadas our abuelas didn't tell us about. My name is Ana Lopez. I'm a sexpert, future doctora, certified sex and life coach, proud Latina, and your go-to guide for all things sex. I'm here to help you kick vergüenza to the curb and teach you to have guilt-free sexual pleasure. Basically, I'm here to help you have mind-blowing sex without the guilt and shame you learned to have growing up. Let's be real. La comunidad latina doesn't talk about sex, pero que suerte tienes because this Latina does. It is my vision to have Latinas worldwide discussing sex with one another just like they do with chisme. Así que prepárate. I'm about to change the way you view sex para siempre. So before I get into today's episode, I wanted to share a quick story, but because I see this happening so often with my clients, this thought pattern, and it is ruining your sex life. And so I wanted to share it before I get into today's planned episode. So I normally drop my podcast episodes on Monday mornings, and it is now Tuesday afternoon. If you're listening to this in real time, I drop this episode on a Tuesday afternoon, even though normally I drop my podcasts on Monday morning. And by drop, I mean publish. I don't know where I'm getting the word drop from. Anyway, last week, and normally I schedule my podcasts on the weekend. So it'll be between Friday and Sunday. I schedule the podcast to go out to you all on Monday mornings, right? And on last week on Wednesday, I got a migraine. I started feeling really sick. I was taking medication and it wasn't working, and I just got worse and worse as the week went on. The weekend I spent all weekend in bed, and then Monday I actually spent all day in bed as well, kind of recuperating. I was better at that point, but my body needed to recover. Because if y'all don't know, when you are sick, just because you're not sick anymore, your body is still recovering, right? So you still need that time afterwards. It's like if you broke a bone, right? Sure, your bone's not broken anymore, but you're still recovering. And so the same thing when y'all are sick, whether it's a migraine or the flu or the common cold, when you are not sick anymore does not mean that you should be at 100%. If you are, great, but it makes total sense that you are not if you are not, because your body is still recovering. I digress. Anyway, the point is that I was feeling like shit all weekend and I did not schedule an episode to go out. And so now you are hearing this episode on a Tuesday instead of a Monday. And I could have said, you know what, fuck it, I missed it on Wednesday, I'll just skip it, and I'll just, schedule the post for next Monday, or schedule the podcast to go out for next Monday, this, that, and the other. And I considered that because I've still, as I mentioned, am not feeling 100%, and that makes sense, and I've got shit to do. And I could have just scheduled it for next Monday, or, just waited until the weekend until I'm feeling, 100% back to normal, and then schedule the podcast to go out on this upcoming Monday. But here is my thought process, is I am not feeling 100%, but I did have the energy to publish the podcast today. It doesn't take me that long. I felt well enough to do it. I checked in with my body. I feel well enough to do it. It is fine. And the more important thing here is that I didn't say okay, well, never mind, now I have to wait because circumstances weren't ideal. And that is what so many of you do with sex. I mentioned this in an episode back in January, my comeback episode. And if you haven't listened to that episode, go and listen to it. And even if you have, go back and re-listen to it, because this is a perfect example of what y'all do. It's well, the conditions weren't perfect. We were supposed to have sex yesterday and we didn't. So, oh, well, we're going to have to wait until next time. Wait until next date night. Wait until, the next time my mom babysits or whatever. And it doesn't have to be that way. And when you can let go of that, that is when your sex life flourishes. And actually, that is when your life flourishes in general, because y'all are holding so tightly, and I'm talking to myself here as well. We hold so tightly to these things that like have to be a very specific way, otherwise they don't matter, and it is not useful. And I know it is easier said than done, but I want to point out that this type of thought process is ruining your sex life and potentially ruining other areas of your life as well. Okay? So I just want you to like simmer on that. Let it sit in your brain. Because rather than saying, okay, when is the next best time that I could do this thing? You're like, fuck it, we're not going to do it at all, ever. Which is actually not what you want. You want to be having sex. You want to be having mind-blowing sex. And the way to do that is by actually having sex. So if you're just saying, fuck it, never mind, anytime, something goes wrong, you're never going to have mind-blowing sex. Because you have to have sex in order to have mind-blowing sex. So I don't want to make this too much longer. I have an episode planned for you already. So let me know what you thought about this. Drop a line, what the fuck? Send me a DM on Instagram or send me an email on @sexandspanglish.com. All the information is in the show notes. And enjoy this episode about understanding your body holistically. There are only 3 things that you need in order to have mind-blowing sex on demand: an understanding of your body, the ability to effectively communicate that, and the skills of rest and rejuvenation. And there are 2 ways I want you to begin thinking about your body: sexually and holistically. Sexually is what you like and what you don't like. So this is kind of like your sexual preferences, right? So this could be like, I like my nipples touched, but I don't like my ass touched. Or it could be more of like, sexual acts, right? So it's like, oh, I love anal, but I hate vaginal penetration. Or I love vaginal penetration, but I hate anal. Like, I like doggy style, but I don't like missionary. Like, whatever, right? Those are all sexual. And then we think of holistic. It's what your body looks like. It's really like how your body functions, what's normal for you. So some examples of this could be like what your cycle looks like, what it feels like when you're coming down with something, your physical limitations, your emotional being, what your body looks like. And in last week's episode, I described this as like, what I want you to know your body as intimately as you would know like your infant child, right? So if you're a parent and you've had a child, or presumably if you don't have a child, I imagine you still can kind of understand the concept of like, if you're caring for this tiny being that cannot fend for itself, you would know that baby's body very intimately because you are the one that is caring for it, right? And so I want you to know your body that intimately. And in today's episode, we're going to take a deep dive into understanding your body holistically. So you're going to get information about like what this looks like. So again, I want everyone listening to this episode to have mind-blowing sex on demand. And even if you never have sex again, it is still vitally important for you to have an understanding of your body. I'm going to dedicate an entire episode of why you want to understand your body. Again, I want to go in depth. I love taking deep dives into things. And so it's normal for me to say this. But anyways, this is going to have its own episode. But I want everyone listening to this to have mind-blowing sex on demand. So I'm recording this episode with the assumption that you do want to have mind-blowing sex on demand. And either way, even if you don't, keep listening because I want you to have an understanding of your body. It is vital. So I'm going to be talking about understanding your body holistically today. In this episode, I'm going to give you some tangible techniques that you can start implementing. So be sure to have a pen and paper or something to type with ready. And if you are driving, definitely download this episode, save it so you can come back to it and write down the questions because the questions are going to be very helpful. They are not by any means necessary. This isn't the only way to do this, but it's going to be super helpful. It's going to be like a really good head start for you. I want you to keep in mind that this isn't something you're going to learn overnight. It takes time. It's also not something that you're just going to check off your to-do list. It's an ongoing process. I myself, as someone who's been doing this for years, is still continually learning about herself. I want you to think about this as if you were getting to know someone. Like maybe you've been with your partner for a really long time. Like I myself have been with my partner almost 5 years now, and I'm still learning about him to this day. Even my friends that I've known forever, I'm still learning about them to this day. Sure, do I know the basics? Yeah. Could I maybe like place a drink order or a food order for them very easily without talking to them? Do I maybe know what they're probably going to say to a question that I ask? Right? Probably. However, there's still tons of things to learn about people. And we are constantly learning about people in our lives, and I want you to take the same approach with yourself. So, I'm going to invite you to think about this as something you're never going to stop doing. This is going to take pressure off to learn everything right away, and it's going to lead you to learning even more about yourself. There are so many things to learn about your body, and I don't want you to get discouraged. So, again, we're going to start with, as we did last week, what you do know, because I promise you, there are things that you do know. Your brain is going to immediately go to, I don't know. What do I know about my body? I'm not sure. But I want you to push yourself a bit here. You do know something about your body. So what is it? I want you to list 3 things that you know right now in this moment about your body. So go ahead and write it down, type it out. If you're driving, think about it. What are 3 things that you know right now about your body? It could be anything, but I'm going to give you some examples. Maybe you know your cycles are painful, or they're irregular, long, short, heavy, light. Maybe you know when you're about to get your period, and you know that because of mood changes or specific cravings or energy levels changing. Or maybe you know when you're going to get sick, right? And there's like a numerous ways that you know that you might be getting sick, right? Other than like, oh, I have a sore throat. For me, mine is like a significant change in energy. And it's just like this very specific feeling that I have of like, oh shit, I'm about to get sick, right? Like I know. And so I want you to think about, for you, what are 3 things that you know? It doesn't have to be cycle related if you don't want it to be. It also doesn't have to be about you getting sick, but what are 3 things that you know right now about your body in general? It doesn't have to be sex related. This is about you and your body just as a human being. And after you've listed those 3 things, I want you to consider 4 main areas. These are not the only areas to gain knowledge in about your body, but they're a great place to start. Your cycle, energy levels, nutrition and hydration, stress levels, and mental health. Those are actually 5 areas, but 5 areas. Okay, so we've already got the 3 things that we already know, and honestly, that is just for you to have, to acknowledge, to celebrate. I know something about my body. Now, when we go into learning more about your body, this is what these 5 areas are for. So when it comes to your cycle, when do you start your period? What is the blood quantity like? Like how heavy is your flow, or how light is your flow? What is the quality, right? So is it like bright red? Is it dark brown? Is it like pinkish? What is the quality like? How long does your period last? Is it painful? How painful? Do you experience mental changes, right? Do you have forgetfulness? Or maybe you're like super anxious. You find yourself ruminating a lot, right? Is there a lot of brain fog? Do you, or maybe there's a lot of mental clarity, right? Do your eating habits change at all, right? So do you get more hungry or less hungry? Do you feel nauseous, right? All of those things that are related to your cycle. There could be changes in discharge, right, throughout your cycle. So not just, when I say cycle, I mean as it relates to your period, but also you're still on your cycle when you are not bleeding, right? So like throughout your cycle, Are you, are there changes? What are the, not are there, because there are, but what are the changes in your discharge? The color changes, right? The consistency, even the smell, right? All of those things. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is definitely questions that can get you started in terms of getting to know yourself and your cycle. This is to just get you started. Now, if you decide to go with energy levels, some questions that you might ask yourself is like, how is my sleep? How much sleep do I need? And I don't want you to try to be a hero here and be like, "Oh, I can operate on 5 hours of sleep." Like, are you currently operating on 5 hours of sleep? Sure. But if you are living on pots of coffee, you are probably not fully functioning. You might be getting shit done. That doesn't mean that you're fully functioning. If you're super forgetful, if you have a ton of brain fog, if it's so hard for you to get out of bed in the morning, right? If you have trouble falling asleep at night, right? Those are all indications that you're not getting enough sleep. And so I want you to ask yourself, like, truly, how much sleep do I think that I need? I actually just did this with a client of mine. She's been struggling with sleep issues for a while now. And we started going over things that, things that might be impacting her sleep. And she was saying, like, yeah, I think, and we had this conversation more than once, right? And so every time we talked, she was like, yeah, I think I need like 7 hours of sleep. I'm like, okay, cool. Like 7 hours. I believe you. And it turns out that she thinks she needs 7 hours. But what's interesting about this is that she hasn't actually been getting 7 hours of sleep because she goes to sleep like she's like in bed for 7 hours, but she's constantly getting up throughout the night. And so she's actually not even getting 7 hours. She's getting less than 7 hours. So we actually don't know how much sleep that she needs. We just know that she probably needs more sleep than she's already getting because she's exhausted, right? So we're like, okay, not only do you need better quality sleep, but you also need more sleep. And so, I want you to think about like, okay, maybe I'm consistently getting 5 hours of sleep, for example, but like, what is my energy like? Like, just because I'm alive and breathing, that doesn't mean you're fully functioning. Just because you're getting shit done doesn't mean that you're fully functioning. You can survive for now with 5 hours of sleep, but your body probably needs more, right? And so I want you to think about that of like, how much sleep do I think I need? And maybe that means as you begin to understand your body, you try sleeping different amount of hours to see what happens, maybe taking a nap, right? Like all of those things. Again, this is exploratory. So I want you to ask yourself in terms of energy levels, like how rejuvenated do you feel when you wake up in the morning, right? How easy is it or hard is it for you to fall asleep at night? Are you experiencing brain fog or forgetfulness? All of those things. Do you like absolutely need coffee and do you need a shit ton of it? Otherwise you can't focus, like, or energy drinks, right? That's an indication of like where your energy levels are. Next category, nutrition and hydration. How do certain foods make you feel? Some of y'all are just eating things because you think they taste good, and I get it. I really get it. But there are foods that are making you feel like shit, and you're so oblivious that they are making you feel like shit because you are not paying attention. So I want you to, this isn't about dieting or getting rid of specific foods or making sure you're eating specific foods. This is not that. This is understanding how certain foods impact your body specifically, not what TikTok is telling you or pseudoscience is telling you, right? Like, I want you to be clear on how specific foods impact your body. So I'm going to give you a specific example. Broccoli is amazing, right? It has amazing health benefits. I'm not a huge fan of it. Like, it's all right, but it has amazing health benefits, right? It's not necessarily going to do like any harm per se, right? Like it's not like a junk food. That said, there are many people, myself included, that can't really tolerate broccoli. For a lot of people, it causes bloating, it causes gas. For me, it just causes a lot of like intestinal discomfort. Like I like it, it's okay, but I have to eat it cooked. And I actually don't even really like it cooked. I prefer it raw. Anyways, that's it. So I know how that impacts me. And so I am cognizant of that when I go to eat broccoli. When I prepare it for myself, when I go to a restaurant that has broccoli in it, right? Like I'm cognizant of that. So even though broccoli is amazing, I'm not just like, oh, well, I have to eat broccoli because broccoli is healthy and blah, 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 blah. No, I'm like, oh, this is how broccoli makes me feel. And even though it's like a quote unquote healthy, I'm still cognizant of how it impacts me, right? And the same could go for like quote unquote junk foods, right? Like, I want you to be cognizant, again, I've said this 7 billion times already, how they make you feel, not what presumably they're supposed to make you feel. I want you to think about, are you skipping meals or are you overeating, right? And if so, when? When are you skipping meals? Are you constantly skipping breakfast or are you constantly skipping lunch, dinner, something else? When, during like what seasons of your life, right? Maybe it's not a constant thing, but it's maybe when you're working a lot of overtime or you have a lot of stress, right? Maybe it's during your cycle. Maybe it's something else, right? I want you to figure out if you are skipping meals or you're overeating, when is this happening? During what events, life events, is this happening? And why are you skipping meals or overeating, right? Presumably it's time related. Okay, fine. But again, let's get more specific here. What is it? It's not just, oh, I don't have time. That's not helpful, right? So if you're like, okay, well, I'm short on time because I've been working a lot of overtime and the kids are in sports and it's like by the time we get home, we have like, I have to like feed them and then they have bath time and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, we were feeding your kids. Why aren't you feeding yourself, right? So I want you to be cognizant and be really specific of why you are doing the things that you're doing. How much water do you drink a day? Now, there's general guidelines out there about 8 glasses of water a day, and that's great. Fine. I think what's more important is to notice the color of your urine, right? Like when you go pee, is it bright fucking yellow? Is it so acidic that it's burning you, perhaps? Right? Like, I want you to be cognizant of like what your pee looks like. It should be a light yellow. So, thinking about that is nutrition and hydration. The next category is stress levels. How stressed are you? Do your reactions match what's happening in your life? So the example that I always give is if you are literally crying over a glass of spilled milk, if you get super pissed off when someone misses, let's say you're behind a car in traffic and they don't move fast enough and so you miss a light, right? It's like turned yellow and they stopped and you're like, we could have both fucking made it. What are you doing? And you get super pissed off. That is probably an indication that you are super stressed. You are like up to here. You can't see me, but my hand is like at the top of my head, right? You are up to here with your stress levels. Are you constantly tensing up, right? Like, are you grinding your teeth? Is your jaw tensing up? Is your body tensing up? Are your shoulders up to your ears, right? Are you noticing that your shoulders are super high? That is where a lot of people carry stress. Physical pain can also be a sign of this if you're not noticing. It's very common for you not to notice that you're tensing up, but physical pain can be a sign of this. So if you're noticing you're having upper back or neck pain, if you're noticing that you are having tension headaches, so that would be headaches in the front of your head, or you're having pain in the front of your ears, or even in your jaw, those are definitely signs that you're tensing up. That could also be a sign of TMJ or some pelvic health issues. So definitely something to look into as well. I want you to figure out, how do you know when you're stressed? What are the telltale signs? And are you looking out for those things? Right? And the last category is mental health. And this is definitely related to stress, but not always, right? There is some overlap, but it deserves its own category. So, does the best vacation sound like a trip away from everyone and everything? If so, you might be experiencing some mental health issues, right? Like, and to be clear, I love alone time. I am home alone right now and I could not be happier, right? Like, I love my alone time. But if the only thing that you ever want to do is be alone in like a quiet room from everyone and everything, that tells me that you are not getting enough time for yourself. And so that's something to be cognizant of, right? Like if that's the only option that ever comes up to you, that's an indication that's something you're in need of. Do you have little to no desire to do things, even things you like to do? Right? That could be an indication that your mental health is suffering. It's a sign of depression, right? If you're like, oh, I really like dancing, but I never want to dance, like that just sounds like exhausting, right? Like your mental health is probably suffering a little bit. Is it exhausting for you to think about going out with friends or going to a family function or just adding something out of your routine, right? So if your regular routine is Monday through Friday, the kids have school, they have sports, you have dinner time, bath time, right? You have work. And then, on the weekends, like you like to, prepare for the week. You like to get the house clean, all of that. And then it's like, oh, bam, Saturday we have a birthday party. Sunday we have like a church function. And you're like noticing yourself like freaking out, either internally or externally. That is probably an indication that your mental health is suffering. So super important to be asking yourself these questions. And again, I just want to say that all of these questions that I've presented here today are starters. They are not an exhaustive list by any means, but is really a way to get you started. And I do want to add that while there are more questions that you can ask yourself, there's always more questions to ask yourself. There's not like a right list or like this, like these are the exact questions that you need to ask yourself, right? Like it is really just, there are unlimited amounts of questions that you can ask yourself about your holistic health. And I just want you to get started, and you can gain just these questions that I asked you today. In each category, there is at least 3 to 4 questions. At least there's more in every single category, but at least there's like 3 to 4 questions that you can ask yourself that is going to give you so much information, because there is so much to learn about your body. And again, there's always going to be shit that you're going to be learning about your body. And so I want you to keep that in mind. There is no rush to get anywhere. So again, the 5 categories are your cycle, energy levels, nutrition and hydration, stress levels, and mental health. I want you to choose one of these areas. Any of them will do. You can start from anywhere. There is no better or right way to begin. Just pick one. Then I want you to go back and write down the questions that I asked you in each of these categories. And I want you to begin keeping a log or a diary of what you notice. Again, there is no specific format to this. Just write down what you notice. That's it. Whatever format works for you is the best format. Again, this is exploratory. It is not a means to an end. And you're going to begin to notice things that you can incorporate into your sex life and into your daily life. Things that you can modify, things that you can get rid of entirely. And this shit is going to change your life forever. Not only your sex life, but your life in general. This, combined with the ability to effectively communicate and the skills of rest and rejuvenation, is going to lead you to having mind-blowing sex on demand. When you've got plenty of time with one area, and plenty is definitely subjective, but when you've spent what you feel like is a good enough time with one area, then I want you to revisit this episode and write down the questions for the next area. And I do want to say that while there are 5 areas, you can always come back to an area at any given time, particularly if you notice that you're kind of struggling in that area, right? Begin asking yourself these questions. We've covered a lot today, and I want to emphasize once again the importance of taking your time with all of this. You're going to begin to notice changes in how you treat yourself, your sexual performance, and your health as you work through these exercises. There is absolutely no need to rush. Take your time, pick one area, and start there.